I remember being terrified of stepping outside of higher ed because it was all I knew, and I loved so much about it, but my passion was just pulling me out to do this thing that, again, I just couldn't believe that somebody would pay me to like let me talk to them about their strengths and help them understand them. So my passion is what I think really drew me out. But then when I got there, it was so hard.
Today's guest is a longtime friend, LeAnne Lagasse, keynote speaker, consultant, and executive coach. We talk about leadership that doesn't fit the typical mold and how employee engagement is more than just a buzzword. It's the foundation for lasting impact. We even dive into her upcoming book and how she helps people close the gap between who they think they are and how they're actually experienced. Buckle up. This one is full of insight and encouragement. Welcome back to Leading Lubbock. Today I get to sit down with a very special friend of mine, LeAnne Lagasse. Actually, I've known LeAnne for a little while, for some years. Yes. Yeah. So LeAnne, thank you so much for coming on and being here today.
Thanks for having me, Ruben. I'm excited.
Yes, I am too, because we've had lots of conversations, but I don't know that we've dived into leadership as much as we're going to today. So it's going to be a fun kind of twist on the friendship and on the conversations. So
let's do it.
It's going to be fun. All right. Real quick, want to give people a little bit of a background of who you are. You are a keynote speaker, which is incredible. I'm excited to hear more about this. And then also a consultant for businesses, correct? Mm-hmm. And executive coach. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So now I have the just deepest joy of getting to work with organizations all over the country. I get to help them boost their employee engagement and their retention, and also equip their people managers. And so I do that through a couple of different things: keynote speaking and consulting. Sometimes I'll help organizations with longer term projects. If they're really struggling with their employee engagement or they're struggling to keep employees, I'll get in there and dig in and get to help them think through some of the strategies they're using or not using.
Yeah.
And then I also do a lot of executive coaching, helping leaders, both those I think that are like high capacity and just really want to go from good to great, and also those that are really struggling. Maybe even sometimes they did not sign up for executive coaching themselves. Okay. They were signed up for executive coaching, but I have a deep heart for those leaders too, because it's been my experience that 99% of leaders don't wake up thinking, how could I be super toxic today? And how could I be super, difficult, but just need help and needs better strategies. So that's the work I do now. My background's in higher ed. As you know, I was a professor at Texas Tech for 14 years. I actually still teach one class, keep my kind of toe dipped in the higher ed waters, but it's at Missouri State University, which is very random. But I had a former department chair who got me hooked up there. So I teach for their online MBA program, a course on professional communication skills. So I do have a couple of different hats that I wear, but it's sort of all about using communication strategically to build leaders and drive engagement and retention.
Yeah, so you're under this big umbrella. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I'm hearing leaders that you're impacting, mm-hmm. and kind of helping shape and form how they lead effectively.
Yeah.
And also, I'm curious too about the employee engagement side. So I do want to let's circle back up to that in just a second. I also want to highlight your family, because I know them. They're near and dear to me as well. So married to Ben Lagasse.
It's true.
Yeah, and then 3 kiddos. So you got Isaac, Eli, and Abby.
That's right.
And age ranges again?
Yeah, so Isaac actually just yesterday at the filming this turned 17. And then Eli is 14 right now, and Abby is 11.
Wow.
So we're in the thick of teenage and preteen years. Yeah.
You're in it.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's fun, most days. Yeah.
Yeah. It baffles me too sometimes to think about like the life that people live at home, when they've got teenagers, preteens, and then they're also doing so much, especially as a mom, that you're doing so much in the business world too. I don't know how you do it. So way to go.
Yeah.
You don't even look tired. So you're doing it gracefully.
Thanks for I'll take it. Thanks.
Yeah, you bet. Okay, so employee engagement. I do want to hear a little bit about how, like, what strategies are you using when you're helping leaders, and then helping bring their employees into the culture and bring them into the productivity? Like, what does that look like for you? I'm fascinated by this.
Yeah. So, all right, when I think about what does successful leadership look like, it is through the lens of employee engagement.
Okay.
So I'm going to start with a little soapbox that I've got. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
I think that we do a huge disservice in a ton of our leadership development and equipping. And I think it's because we create this sort of over romanticized idea of what leadership is, and we make it this lofty thing that feels so unattainable to 90% of the population. And what I mean by that is we think about leadership as like it's this charismatic, like inspirational, motivating, often extroverted, like just again very charismatic person. And I think that kind of leadership equipping can be motivational, but it has been my experience that it often makes a lot of people feel like they're not cut out for leadership, like they don't have the right stuff for leadership, like they are this second, third tier of leader because they're not this kind of, charismatic influencer figure. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of our leadership equipping is geared towards trying to get people to be this thing that they're just frankly not going to be.
You're putting them in a box.
Yes.
Yeah.
And again, I think the intentions are good, but what ends up happening and what I see a lot, especially in my executive coaching, is people who are so hard on themselves because they feel like they're not great leaders. And when I start digging in, well, what are the good outcomes of leadership? Like when you think about, like, let's even forget trying to define the term, what is leadership? Let's think about what are the outcomes that good leaders get. Okay. And once we start thinking about that, this is where the employee engagement piece comes in. It's reverse engineering from those outcomes, right? Reverse engineering, what is the communication, the rhythms, the behaviors that I can implement that help me get to those outcomes, to where I don't have to be, if I'm not naturally the most charismatic, motivating, inspirational leader, I can use what comes natural to me to get there. So the way that ties in with employee engagement is we know that employee engagement, right, as a construct is how involved in, committed to, and enthusiastic an employee is about their role and also the organization. Okay. So it takes both of those things. Do I feel good about my role? Do I feel like I'm in the right seat on the bus? Do I get energy from the work I do every day? And do I feel connected to the mission, the vision, the values of my organization?
The business as a whole.
Do I trust the leadership in my organization? Like, am I on board with the place I'm working? And so for an employee to be engaged, you need both of those things. Here's the deal. The Gallup organization found that I think it's one of the most revolutionary leadership studies out there. And it continues to be replicated in a lot of different ways in the research, but 70% of the variance in employee engagement is determined solely by the people manager. People manager meaning leader. Okay. So your leader accounts for 70% of how engaged you are in the workplace. So when I think about leadership, I think, how do we drive engagement? And then retention is a positive outcome of engagement, right? How do we drive engagement? And how do we help unique leaders get to those outcomes using what already comes naturally to them and not some over romanticized idea of what leadership is. So that is a hill I will die on, is we do a lot of people a big disservice and make them feel like they're not cut out for leadership, like they don't want to step up because they don't see themselves in that light. Okay. And we can all get to the same outcomes using different methods.
Right. So what comes to my mind is like people going to big conferences or something and you've got somebody speaking and they are energetic and they are like, is that sometimes where people can maybe take that perception of that's what I need to look like to be a leader in my organization? And that's what they're teaching me? I
think so. I think you see it in a lot of leadership books as well. Okay. And again, it's very well intentioned, and it's not even that a lot of that advice is wrong per se. It's just that it doesn't allow for individual variability and uniqueness and personality. I mean, think about leaders that you know who they're not the flashy, they're not like influencers, but they are steady, safe, predictable. They are brilliant. They get stuff done. Their face is probably not going to be, I'm not the face of the company, but like I am a steady, maybe analytical leader. And those people often feel like I'm like the second tier of leader when they read leadership books, when they go to conferences, because they don't fit into this kind of mold of charismatic leader.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. And so when you're talking about individual businesses and leaders and you're mentioning outcomes, and them having the outcomes they're looking for, reverse engineering back to the strengths of the leader. Are those outcomes very specific, or are you talking about a general outcome of leadership?
Oh, no, they're really specific.
Okay.
And that's the good news. That's what, for example, think of that analytical leader who thinks, I'm very overwhelmed. I don't know how to get to those outcomes. If I can sit down with that person and say, look, let's examine what are these outcomes we know based on research. For example, did you know the foundation of employee engagement is, does an employee feel like they have role clarity and that they have clear expectations in their role, that they know where the goalpost is? So if we know that, okay, that's an outcome we want to get, is your team member saying, I know what's expected of me. I know what success looks like. I know how I'm expected to communicate around here. If that's the goal, if that's the outcome, then okay, analytical leader, how do we help you build in rhythms, structures, processes, whatever makes sense for you to get you to that outcome? Another outcome, we know that praise and recognition drives engagement and retention. And a lot of organizations, a lot of leaders sort of just, I think, have good intentions and they hope that's going to happen. But what we can do is we can actually operationalize that. We can help the analytical leader who maybe isn't the most naturally like generous with praise to perhaps build systems and structures to help him or her deliver praise and recognition in a way that feels authentic to them, that's maybe scheduled, maybe it's a to-do list, maybe, it could be all sorts of things. My point there is just the outcomes we know, recognition, clear, expectations. Does somebody at work care about me? Is somebody giving me feedback at work? Do I have room to grow? Am I a part of something bigger than myself? These are the outcomes. We can all get to those outcomes using different methods. Yeah.
That's great, because my mind actually was going outcome wise, like almost production, like what's the result of the business itself, like almost like so much client based. But you're talking about, you started with employee engagement, and that it sounded like that's where you boil success even down to. So we're talking outcomes regarding employees.
Yeah. Right. But here's the thing, Ruben. Sorry, I got too excited. I interrupted you.
You're good.
Because to your point, when organizations drive engagement and retention, so when they see increases in engagement, they see improvements in all sorts of business metrics that you're, so, I could go on and on, but you see, again, increases in retention, business outcomes in sales environments. You see improvements in customer service metrics. When engagement goes up, you see improvement in productivity, efficiency, perceptions of team cohesion. Again, I could go on and on and on. Revenue, business, financial business outcomes.
Yeah.
So this is why organizations, if they're smart, they'll invest in their employee engagement, because the result of that is positive for all sorts of things in your organization. Yeah.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And that's where I was going to in my thought process. It's like, surely this has more of an impact than just what goes on internally, right? It's got an external impact. The ripples probably carry on for a ways.
Huge.
Yeah. Do you see, since maybe post-COVID or even maybe different generation now that's coming into the workforce, that the way that you look at employee engagement, has that shifted quite a bit over the last several years? Or do you kind of still continue using the same approaches? Are they tried and true?
So, such a good question. Okay, in general, short answer, tried and true. For, over 5 decades, again, the Gallup organization's been researching employee engagement, and those drivers, drivers of engagement, like praise and recognition, clear expectations, mission-driven work, those kind of things, right? There's about 10 to 12 of them, depending on how you kind of put them in buckets. Those drivers of engagement are pretty tried and true. What's interesting, though, the research on Gen Z is still a little bit, we're still out on that. They're still entering the workforce. Yeah. So far, they seem to be tracking a little bit more with younger millennials. But again, jury's still out a little bit on Gen Z. One interesting thing I will say that Gallup has found about millennials in particular, it's funny because when we say millennials, a lot of people think like a 20-year-old. No,
Sure.
millennials are
No.
we're in our 40s
Yeah,
now.
yeah.
So elder geriatric millennials, which is apparently what I am.
Okay.
I'm like almost Gen X, I'm like the very first
I
millennial.
don't know that I needed to hear that.
I know,
I mean,
it's so
come
depressing.
on.
But so one interesting thing that Gallup found about millennials is that that differentiates them from Gen X and then baby boomers, and also like the greatest generation, also called the silent generation, that's above baby boomers, is that a big driver for them is feeling like they're connected to the vision, mission, and purpose of their organization. That is a bigger driver for millennials. It's still a driver for the others, but it's a big enough differentiator for millennials than it is for Gen Xers or baby boomers.
Okay. So it may elicit just a little bit of a twist on what you're already doing.
Right. It's just more important. It's a little bit more important. Yeah.
Okay. That makes sense. So one word that I have not heard you use yet is culture. And I'm curious how, because a lot of times in my conversations with leaders, like culture comes up a lot.
Yeah.
Where does culture fit into this? And is it another way of saying what you're talking about, or?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Ruben. I sometimes will, when I'm describing what I do, I'll talk about helping organizations with their workplace culture. But I'm big on words, and culture is another one of those words that I think it can be so ambiguous and so big that people have a hard time putting like handles on it. Like, what is it? Yeah. And actually, it's so funny. So when I taught communication, well, I still teach communication, but I cannot tell you how many communication textbooks written by the experts in communication don't actually define the word communication. Like if you go to the glossary in the back, you'll find definitions for all sorts of things, but like actually communication is hard. Leadership is another word like that.
Okay.
Culture is a word like that, where they're just it's so big and the connotations are so big. So I think about workplace culture more as like it's tangential to a lot of the work that I do. It's kind of, it is a part of what I do, but I don't like to use the word as much because I just think people don't know how to put handles on it and how to operationalize that. Yeah. And that's affected by all sorts of variables, some that you can control, some that you can't, right? So I don't use it a ton, every now and then.
Okay. Well, I'm so glad that you said it that way because, I do talk culture a lot. Yeah. And again, this spot right here, culture comes up a lot on this podcast. People ask even about Clear Rock, the business that I run and operate with Tanner. They'll ask what's different about it. And it's like, there's something about the culture, but also hear other people like, man, the culture over here is great. And I'm like, well, surely we're talking not necessarily about the same exact thing inside of our businesses. And there's probably something even unique that we're doing that makes our culture strong. Right. And it's something not as a whole when you think about culture as the term, but it's more about something specific that just has this embodied feeling that goes along with it that we call culture. Yeah. And so it's just, my mind was like, I thought that maybe that was the track. And I love hearing you say that because it does put feet to it. But now I'm like, man, I want to dive into that better. That's probably a conversation we need to have of like, how do we evaluate? What's the thing?
Well, that's what I was going to say is I actually get really nervous when it happens a lot in talent acquisition or when you're hiring, recruiting people is we have this great workplace culture. And I'm always the one that's like, cite your source, like, how do you know that? Yes. How do you know? And so I'm very big on employee listening, which is a term that just means strategic effort to capture the collective voice of your employees, right? So I'm very big on employee listening. So when I hear people say in, their job descriptions, like we have a great workplace culture, I think I would want to know more specifically, like, do you have data to say, hey, 87% of our employees say that they would recommend this organization to a friend as a great place to work. That is the kind of data that will actually signal to potential employees that you have a good workplace culture, right? It's so funny. I love Texas Roadhouse. I just want to say that.
Hey,
I don't know. You're like, where are you going with this? But they wear those shirts that say, I love my job. And I always cringe every time I go in there and I think, don't do that. Typically, employees don't love when organizations speak on behalf of them unless it is, again, actualized like data. So I always, no joke, I will sometimes ask that people, okay, how do you all feel about having to wear those shirts? And most of the time they go, you know, and that's not a knock on Texas Roadhouse, but it's more just to say that if you're going to make a claim like we have a great workplace culture, that means almost nothing to people unless you can actually provide some data or some testimonials, just like we would with our customers, right?
Yes.
You know, say we have a great customer experience unless you've got data to back that up. So same with your employees.
Okay. Do you come in to businesses and help with that data? Like, do you like, hey, let's evaluate this a little bit deeper and have certain questions you ask and surveys that you submit? Okay.
I do.
I love that.
I help with both the kind of quantitative data, so employee engagement surveys, where you're capturing anonymous and confidential data, which I think is very important. And then I also go in and do like stay interviews instead of exit interviews.
Okay.
Exit interviews are almost worthless. Really.
Sure.
I mean, I think you can get some interesting little tidbits here or there, but they do nothing for retention really, because you've lost this employee, right? So stay interviews are more strategic conversations during the actual employee life cycle, where you're trying to get your finger on a pulse to what makes an employee feel like they want to stay here.
Yeah.
You know, what would tempt them to leave, right? I also will conduct focus groups with organizations to help them identify themes that are contributing to some of the challenges that they have. So I do a lot of work in employee listing, and I believe that it's a crucial piece of the puzzle for organizations to really understand what their employees want to stick around. Yeah.
Okay. So whenever you're going in as a consultant to a business, are you also working with the employees? Like, are you bringing them into kind of workshop environments, or is this mainly leadership you're working with like a little bit of a touch on the employees through surveys, etc.?
It kind of depends. So I also do a lot of keynote speaking, workshop facilitation, trainings, and I feel very fortunate. A lot of my clients come back to me when they have a problem, or so maybe I went and did a workshop, and then 6 months later, they call and say, hey, we're noticing we're losing a lot of employees in this department. Can you come help? Absolutely. So we maybe do some strategic listening initiatives or things like that. So I sort of am very passionate about what are the tools in my toolbox that can help me help the organization get to better outcomes. And so it could be, sometimes, this is always fun. Sometimes people will call and say, can you come do a training on communication, which is, very broad. And I'm like, okay, what does that mean? But can you come do a training on communication? So then I'll ask some questions in that kind of consult call. And very quickly I'm going, okay, a training, I could come do that all day, every day. But that's not going to solve the problem that I'm hearing. I think what you need is something a little bit more strategic, or maybe it's a listening initiative. Let's do a listening initiative before you spend, your resources on a training. Maybe a training will help, but probably not at this point.
Yeah.
So for me, the way that I think operate with integrity in this is to say, I want to make sure that the tools I'm bringing are actually going to solve the problem that they're having, and not just like a plug and play workshop, which again, I can do those all day, every day, and I love them. And I often do recommend that as a part of the process, but not always. That's not always what people need. And sometimes actually, let's imagine you're in a workplace where communication is a big problem, and your leaders go, guess what, everybody, we're going to bring in this person. They're going to do a workshop on communication, and employees that can backfire, because they can go, of course, you think you're going to solve this by bringing in this woman for 4 hours. Now you may be thinking, LeAnne, this is a terrible sales pitch for yourself, know?
Yeah.
But I just believe in that. I just believe so strongly that, we have to be listening to employees to know what they need and want, and what is going to solve the problems best.
Okay, you got a lot of passion when you're talking about this. Like all of it. You can tell this is like, it's not just a job you have, but this is like you're all invested in this mission, right?
Yeah.
Where did that come from? What was it that sparked the whole concept of people need some help with solutions, and I think I can find what they need? Where was that birthed?
Well, good question. I think the way I would answer that is, my entire life, I've always been very, I think, curious about people. And in fact, I often share with clients, when I was little, my mom nicknamed me the nose, in like that I was nosy about like people. Like I was always, and she called me the nose. And because I was, even at a very young age, I was always very curious about people and the differences between people and what makes people tick. And I always saw more uniqueness in people than I did like similarities. And I mean that in a way that is, I always wanted people to feel very seen and known. I wanted to understand people. So growing up, I was always I just was very curious about people. When I got to college, I studied human communication.
Okay.
And I was the very nerdy one in the class who was like trying to read my textbook to my friends. I'm like, listen to this theory. You got to check this out, you know? And my friends were like,
fascinated.
Yeah, they're like, okay, you know, every now and then. I mean, it's interesting stuff. But I just sort of came alive with just curiosity and excitement about understanding the science and the art of people and how we create meaning with one another through communication. And so I think it's this natural talent that I had, this curiosity I had, coupled with an investment in that talent, which is through my education and learning. And so what's fascinating about it, though, is, you know, I didn't really understand until I made a decision to kind of think about moving outside of higher ed and start consulting and training business, you know, on the side. I didn't really realize how much of what I had been training for my whole life was going to work for me in this capacity. When I decided to leave higher ed, again, I loved my job at Tech for so many reasons. You know, I always say I never had a bad day teaching. I came alive when I was teaching. I was very passionate about that too. But when I decided to kind of step out and do consulting and training full time, I really thought I was going to be just in this one very specific lane. And that is helping people understand their strengths, helping leaders understand how to best leverage the strengths of their employees. And I still do that. It's still one of my favorite parts of what I do. But then what happened was I would hear these problems that, you know, a leader might say something that I go, oh, that's interesting. I actually know some stuff about that. And so it was when these problems started popping up that I thought, oh my goodness, I think I can help with that. And they were not offerings in my business that I'd ever anticipated. But it just sort of worked out that I had stored up over time because of my passion, all this knowledge, nerd stuff, you know. And,
I like her. You don't have to say nerd. Passion and knowledge is enough. That works.
But I'd stored up enough kind of, and never enough, of course, because I'm still learning always, but I'd stored up enough that I thought I can help solve that. And so it sort of was just organically happened where I got to just expand my offerings to help clients, and thankfully have gotten good outcomes doing that. But I've also learned the hard way that, you know, sometimes things that I want to help with, I'm not necessarily the best person to help them with it. I care about my clients, I care about them, so I want to help, but I've learned, no, actually, I don't get as great of outcomes in these areas, and so now I'll refer out for those kind of things. So I have learned that over time. I got like almost too greedy with my client. I don't mean greedy like for my clients. I mean greedy like I wanted to work with them because I loved them so much, you know. But I was like, no, this is maybe not the area that I need to work in. Yeah,
there's a lot of humility in that, to be able to know your strengths.
Yeah,
and like, okay, that's where I leaned into my gifts and my talents, and now there's somebody else who has the strengths to now help with the next problem or the next level.
Yeah. Okay. I love that I love how you said that, because one sort of straw man argument that drives me up the wall when people hear the phrase like strengths-based leadership, sometimes people are like, oh, okay, participation trophies for everybody. Let's talk about everybody's strengths. Let's ignore weaknesses. And actually, no. Strengths-based leaders and strengths-based organizations are the most humble, because they have a very clear knowledge of where they tend to bring value and where they struggle to bring value. And so with my clients that are strengths-based organizations and teams, they talk much more openly about their weaknesses and their areas of vulnerability, because they feel empowered to own the areas where they do bring talent and value. So that's something that just drives me bonkers when I hear it, because it's just it's a myth. right? About strengths-based leadership.
Okay. So let's go into the strengths-based, because I know that's probably where you and I left off at one point in time was, around the Gallup Strengths Finder, and just why did that come to your mind? Why do you feel so passionately about strengths-based leadership and just knowing your strengths? Because probably not even just leadership, right?
Yeah, no,
I would imagine just anybody. Yeah. There's a lot of good things that come out of knowing my strengths as an individual, and then knowing maybe where I'm not as strong. So tell me a little bit about your passion behind that.
I think if you understand your strengths clearly, it can change your life. I've seen it. It's been the case for me personally. The reason I got connected with the strengths-based approach in the first place was at Texas Tech. So Tech, when I was an undergrad student, Tech was one of the very first strengths-based universities in the country, which was just such a gift and a grace because, I told you I was the nose, right? Yep. I was curious about people. I get into college and I had a professor assign this instrument. Well, I didn't know it was anything, I was like, okay, I'm going to go take this little thing. And I cannot tell you how much my life changed since I took that assessment.
Wow.
And I always tell people, so the Gallup organization researched this for over, 5, almost 6 decades now. And so this is rooted in quantitative, qualitative data. This is not like which Disney princess character BuzzFeed quiz are you? Which, by the way, I will take that quiz. I want to know.
Do you love this?
I will take that.
I want to know this Disney princess. Yeah. Which one is it?
I'm probably like a Tiana,
okay,
or like a very hard worker, like Goal, or maybe maybe Belle a little bit. But anyway,
okay.
Probably more Tiana in me than Belle. But anyway, so. This instrument it's used by over 90% of Fortune 500 companies. It's used across the globe. It has been instrumental in so many organizations transforming their employee engagement, their employee experience. The instrument measures the presence of talent. And so I think about when I took that assessment, it was kind of giving language to this talent that I'd had my whole life, this curiosity for people. And suddenly I had a tool that could help me do more of what I was naturally good at. And so it just, I'm telling you, when I was a professor at Tech, I used the tool in every which way I could to train and develop my graduate teaching assistants, to work with my students. I used it constantly. And I would tell people all the time, I love my job. If I could do anything in the world, it would be to help people understand themselves and to understand their team members more clearly. And that's what I get to do now.
Yeah.
And it has just changed my life. I think, for me, it was giving myself the freedom to, again, this is where I bring value and where actually I owe it to the people I work with, to my organization, to bring these talents and leverage them in service to this bigger thing every day. But actually, as it turns out, these other areas, I don't bring as much value. And guess what? I can say that.
And there's freedom in it.
There's freedom. And so now what we don't do is we don't use our strengths as crutches. So we don't go to our boss and say, I'm sorry, this thing you have asked me to do does not align with my natural talents and strengths. Instead, we say, okay, so if I've got to get to this outcome, how do I better leverage what I do have to get me there? Okay. Which you've heard me say a little bit like that already today. Yeah. And also, who can I partner with? Who can I delegate to? How do I manage around my weaknesses so that they don't prevent us as a team from getting to the outcomes that we need?
Oh, okay. So Strengths Finder, when you go to like the Gallup, I know there's even like an app and there's books, and it gives you your top 5, right? And then you can see all the way to 34 or so. Yeah. You can unlock all of them. But so it's gonna take me a little bit to get to the question that I'm asking, because I'm gonna go back to that. But one thing that I get passionate about, and I love that there's some similarities here, so I'm trying to see how it aligns, and hopefully you're not going to just prove me wrong. But I have this idea that everybody has their own superpower. Yeah. We all have this like very unique talent and gift, and one of my passions is like finding people's superpower in a way, and it almost sounds like that same thing about strengths. And now here's where I'm going with the top 5. even though I have my number one is harmony. Okay. Number two is like significance. So I look at my top five, and I also have a good friend who's also harmony as number one, but we're still very different, right? We're not the same person because we have harmony as number one. But if you're looking at like top five, my thought then is like, wow, how that creates like the superpower, right? It's the blend of the top strengths that makes me unique, because very few people are going to have everything in the same order as me.
100%.
Okay.
Okay, I'm not going to prove you wrong.
Yes.
I'm going to say
All right, so
what you just described, Gallup, we would call that, it's called theme dynamics, right? It's how they work together. So if you're not, if someone's listening and they're not familiar with Clifton Strengths, you know, the assessment, again, it's measuring the presence of talent, which is a natural pattern of thinking, feeling, or behaving that can be productively applied. By the way, just because you have talent doesn't mean you're using it as a strength. Doesn't mean you're using it productively, right?
Sure.
It could be very raw in its form, but it's talent. Okay, so how are we using it? That gives us agency and ownership over it. But just because you and so I have harmony too. Harmony's in my top five. Harmony is about emotional efficiency. It's about seeing multiple perspectives, helping people get to consensus. I bet in real estate, that helps you with negotiation and helping people practically move through to get to good outcomes, right? So you and I have that, but it's going to show up completely different for both of us because of the other themes, because of the industry, the passion, our experiences. So it's not meant to sort of put people in a box. It's meant to say, hey, you have this natural talent here. So I love how you said that. Like, what's your sort of superpower as a result of this natural talent that you have, how it all works together. So I think you're right.
All right.
Yeah.
I was going to say, man, this whole superpower theme is just about to get shot
Wouldn't
down.
that be awful?
It would. That'd be a rough Friday. Yeah. All right. Let's do something different next. Well, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
So tell me now, was there any kind of shift that took place in LeAnne along the way, like in your journey in life or career, that kind of shaped and maybe gave you a different direction or strengthened the direction you were going on?
Yeah. So the first thing that comes to my mind is, you know, I am a creature of habit. So one of my strengths is discipline. So I'm very structured, ordered. And I would have stayed at Texas Tech until the day I died, you know, and I loved that job for so many reasons. I love the rhythms of, you know, the semesters and all those things. But I was so passionate about this work that when I decided, at the time I had one of my very good friends, Joy Osteen, she was a professor at Tech at the time too. We decided, hey, let's start this training consulting business. We'll do how we've been using Clifton Strengths here at Tech, and we'll take it and maybe start using it with organizations in town. And we did that together for several years. And, you know, I remember being terrified of stepping outside of higher ed because it was all I knew. And I loved so much about it, but my passion was just pulling me out to do this thing that, again, I just couldn't believe that somebody would pay me to like let me talk to them about their strengths and help them understand them. So my passion is what I think really drew me out. But then when I got there, it was so hard because, man, and you know this, kind of doing the entrepreneurial thing and owning your own business. There's the service you provide, which is often very aligned with your natural talents and strengths. And then there's the universe of running a business, everything that it keeps to, you know, that it demands of you to keep it going. And I, of course, had no experience with that. I had such a learning curve. And because I had always been I'm an achiever is one of my other strengths. So I'd always been someone I felt very successful in getting to good outcomes because of my work ethic, you know? And so I would work and work and work, and I was struggling to get the outcomes. Well, of course I was brand new to the business side of things. I remember I joke that Joy and I would be like Googling, how do you run a business? You know? I mean, I'm not. The sad thing is, like, I'm not kidding. Because we didn't know.
Right.
We had no experience to pull from. So how I want to answer that question is, I really struggled operating from, I think, like a performance mindset where I was everything was win or lose for me. I was winning or I was losing in my mind. And in some ways that has been a key to my success. You know, it's my strength, but it was serving me in unproductive ways because I was seeing everything as win-lose. And what I had to learn was I need to adopt more of a learning mindset, which is when I switched from win-lose thinking to like, okay, let's experiment with this and see if it works. Let's experiment with this and see if my ideal customers and market, like if this solves the problems that they have. Let's experiment. Let's learn. If that mindset piece took me several years, and I still struggle with that. I still feel like I have to like preach that to myself a lot, but that was a huge, I think, growing season for me, was going, oh, what got me here, like my work ethic is not enough here. Yeah. I've got to adopt a different mindset or I'm going to crash and burn emotionally, mentally, spiritually, you know, physically, all the ways. So that's probably how I'd answer that is I had a little bit of a crash and burn because I did not come into owning the business part with the best mindset. Yeah.
That word experiment too, like we talked about freedom in different ways, but like, wow, the freedom in saying, I'm going to experiment with this, because when you do that, that's trial and error, right? That's the only way. I remember my chemistry days. Like when you're doing experiments, it's not, I know the outcome here. It's let's see what happens when we do this. What if we increase this or decrease that? And just the experiment idea of this could go sideways, but let's try it. And then we're going to have to do a little bit of an adjustment, you know, down the road, and that's okay. That's part of the experiment.
It was tremendously helpful for me, and that perspective is a big piece of a lot of the executive coaching I do, is helping leaders with their mindsets. And you know, I used to think, like, because I think I was such a check person, I used to think when people talked about mindsets, like, okay, sure, you know, and like, how cheesy is that, you know? And I am telling you, 80% of the executive coaching work that I do is helping leaders reframe experiences, you know, leadership injuries they've had, which is a term that just means like if you had something terrible happen to you as a leader that has wounded you, you know, a leadership injury, helping them reframe things, helping them change the way that change their perspective to get to better outcomes. So mindset, as it turned, I was wrong. It's not just like a cheesy thing. It is actually
pretty fundamental.
Okay. Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm going to shift us a little bit now, because there's a couple topics I want to make sure we hit on today. And one was a book that when I asked you, like, a book that's impacted you, you brought a title with you, and I'm excited to lean into that a little bit, because it's called Soar with Strengths.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about this book and why.
Look at this cover.
Yeah, we might explain this a little bit. Yeah, it's a little colorful staircase up to nowhere. I'm not just to the sky.
I know. Yeah. Right. So this book, Soar with Your Strengths, is after I was introduced to the strengths-based philosophy and this approach when I was in college. I could not get enough. And so my professor actually recommended this book. There have been lots of strengths-based books written. This was the OG. Like this is Donald Clifton so Strengths Finder was actually rebranded to Clifton Strengths. It's the same assessment. Because of him. He is known as the father of the positive psychology movement. Donald Clifton wrote this book, Soar with Your Strengths. So I read it when I was about 18 and a half. I mean, I was like in my freshman year. And it was so foundational to the career choices I made, even today. And so much of the book is capturing the heart of what we're talking about today, the strengths-based approach. But the thing that changed my life the most probably was the research around, you know, we, over the course of our lifetimes, tend to grow most in our areas of strength, not weakness. That's not to say that we shouldn't invest in improving weaknesses. It's just to say we tend not to grow that much. So in my workshops, I'll ask people, who in here has struggled with organization your entire life, right? And usually there's one or two that are like, I've never been organized. And I'll say, okay, over the course of your lifetime, what have you tried to help you grow there? And every time they're like, oh, I've tried different approaches. I took a time management class. I
downloaded all these apps.
Yes. And it's always like, new year, new me. If I can just get the right planner.
Okay,
If I can,
sure.
And so the kind of the conventional approach would say, if we can just get this person the right learning, the right tool, the right planner, the right whatever, they can become this super organized person. But what the research shows is actually very, very, very rare that someone who has always been struggling with organization is going to become a person who can walk into a room and immediately figure out how to turn that chaotic environment into system, structures, processes, organization, right? The thing that I will tell people a lot is, our weaknesses are often explained by talents that we have. So not always, but a lot of times people who do raise their hand for that, like I'm not the most organized, that where they bring a lot of talent is in areas of creativity and innovation. And so they'll often say, yeah, I'm a creative person. I'm, innovative. Well, doesn't that make sense? That if you are, if your brain is wired for creativity and innovation, that is not systems, processes, structures, right?
Yeah.
Replication.
For sure.
And so I think there's some freedom in it. And it's also saying, look, if you invest in your talent and strength, you're going to get infinitely more growth than if you pour all your time, energy, resources into your weaknesses. Again, not to say our weaknesses can't stand in the way of our success, but it is to say, look, I'm going to get bigger ROI on my strengths than I am investing in my weaknesses. And so Donald Clifton completely changed the way I thought about productivity and, personal development, professional development. And so it is a tried and true book. I recommend it to clients all the time. And I'll say like, okay, it is the cover has seen it. We've seen some advancements.
We have,
since then.
It is funny. Like you bring it in and I'm like, hey, that's an older one. Yeah. That's
right. It will change your life.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Oh, that's good. So what I hear too, I love relating leadership back to everyday life because not everybody listening is a CEO or manager in a certain type of role, right? With people underneath them and direct reports and such. A lot of times, it's just somebody who's kind of just going through the day, and they're going to their job and doing what's asked of them, or they're leading their family, moms, dads. What I hear too is that this gives us freedom with not having to be so involved in comparison of like, I look at you and like, oh man, the way she speaks and the way she carries herself, and I wish I could be more of that, and you see everybody else's strengths and you're just comparing them to you and where you lack. And I love this refocus and redirection of like, you don't need to focus on other people's strengths, like applaud those because they're so unique, and you should not be that strength, right? You've got this own blend of strengths that make you you.
It's so true.
Wow, the freedom
Ruben,
that we have in that.
It's so true. And one thing I'll say on that is I work with people with all sorts of strengths, everyone in the book, right? And everybody is going, oh, like if they're very talented in strategic thinking, they're going, I wish I had more relationship building capacity. And the people high in relationship building are going, oh, I just am not as influencing as I'd like to be. Like everybody does that. And the strengths-based approach, what it does is it creates an environment where everybody knows, okay, who tends to, not always, but tends to get the best outcomes in these areas. And there's absolutely freedom in that. There's diversity of talent. Our differences are advantages, and it takes everybody to help us get to the outcomes organizationally that we need.
Yeah. Okay. So all of our strengths are all good.
Yeah.
They're all good.
Oh, yes.
And wanted and needed things.
I love
just finding
all of them.
those.
Yeah.
That's great. Now there's a different book that I want to talk about, and this is one that's pretty near and dear. I don't even know a title yet. I don't know that you know a title yet. Is that right?
I don't.
So tell us a little bit about the project you've been working on.
Yes. So I have been, for the past year, working on a book. I am in the final, like I'm in the finish. I'm like approaching the finish line. My editor has the manuscript right now. We're kind of doing a final proof before we send it on to the designer to kind of actually, which is very scary. Yeah. But I'm very excited about it. It's sort of the culmination of a lot of the work I do that we've talked about today in the areas of helping leaders understand themselves more clearly. And, the research we haven't talked a ton about this, but we actually as human beings are not very self-aware. In fact, most research shows that only about 15%, and that's like a high estimate, of leaders are actually self-aware.
Oh, wow.
And we measure that by self-report data. So this is a simple example, but if I say on a scale of 1 to 10, how effective of a communicator do I think I am? If I give myself an 8, you ask my team and my team says, she's a 4,
okay.
That represents what we call unself-awareness. So only about 15% of leaders are self-aware.
Fascinating.
And and most of us think we are.
Sure.
So I've written this book to help leaders really see themselves clearly and close the gap between how they see themselves and how their team members experience them. So it's funny because originally I thought I want to write this book for people who maybe are really discouraged. Maybe even some of those leaders I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast that are, maybe they didn't sign up for executive coaching on their own. Yeah. Maybe they were told by their boss,
they show up,
you're going to do this with her, Yeah. So originally I thought maybe I would write it for just that person who is maybe they are at the end of their rope and they're realizing, okay, I'm stuck and I guess I've got some stuff wrong and I need help. But the more I kind of thought through it, I was realizing that everybody sort of struggles with self-awareness in leadership in some way. And there's a lot of leaders I work with who are actually the opposite of that kind of problematic almost leader. They are maybe actually phenomenal leader. Their people trust them. They're great, but they go home at night and they feel they don't have self-awareness because they feel like they're terrible leaders. And so they need to close the gap too. They need to close the gap between how they see themselves and how others experience them. Yeah. So I wrote the book for a broader leadership audience. And my hope is that I will capture people across the spectrum who, maybe need to close the gap because other people experience them in more negative ways than they realize. And some who need to read it because they need to see that people see them more positively than they see themselves.
Yeah.
And so it's a lot of my workshops, my trainings, my executive coaching, a lot of strengths-based stuff, although is not unique to Clifton Strengths. That's a tool that I use, but it's not the only tool that you could use for strengths-based work. So I've written a little bit more, diverse kind of methodology there, broadened a little bit, but I'm really excited about it, terrified.
Oh,
absolutely terrified.
It's going to be great. I cannot wait.
But very, very excited. Yeah.
Okay. Well, when that releases, which is
October 7th.
That's not far away. Okay, October 7th.
No,
got
it
the
is
date locked in.
Yeah.
Let us know because I want to make sure that people know that it's out. So we'll share the word. How do people? Because be on the lookout for the book, LeAnne Lagasse. That's all we know right now. We know the author's name, so we'll be on the lookout for it. Also, this leadership training, the keynote speaking, executive coaching, the consulting. How do people get in touch with you if that's something that they're interested in? If somebody's listening and like, man, this is something my business or my organization can use. Yeah. How do they get in touch with you?
Well, so probably the easiest way is my website is leannelagasse.com. Okay. I'm also really active on LinkedIn. So if you're on LinkedIn, I know people are like, they're either like, I love LinkedIn, I'm there, or like, absolutely not. But I'm on LinkedIn.
Intimidated by it.
But I'm on LinkedIn. So those are probably the two best ways to get in touch with me. And yes, the book title, I am just so you know, I have to figure it out in 3 days. Three days from now is the deadline for that, because it's like my editor says, it's LeAnne, the book is like basically ready. We just have to, but it's so hard. And what's funny is my natural talent is not in like creativity and innovation. And so this part has been very hard for me. So I'm crowdsourcing right now. Yeah. I've polled on LinkedIn. I'm asking some people for some help because I know that that's not my area of strength. There you go.
So you're understanding where you need to pull back a little bit. Yeah. Was it hard to write the book when you're...
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And I think it was hard because I'm a speaker and a teacher. And so I know that this content works well. I know it works well in one-on-one coaching. I know it works well in workshops and facilitations, but I've never written it in a book. So trying to figure out, how do I take this and put it into this format for a broad, diverse audience has been hard. The same thing that I shared earlier about like being the nose, right? And I'm so passionate about knowing people uniquely that was honestly the hardest part of writing it, because I don't know,
the
who's
audience
reading it.
Right.
And I want it to speak to a broad enough audience. My editor would say, LeAnne, sometimes you put too many disclaimers on things when you're writing. And I think that's because of that talent I have to speak uniquely to a certain person, that I'm having to kind of lay some of that down. And that's been hard. The biggest fear I've had is I don't want to harm anyone, you know? And I just think, again, I think about that leader who maybe struggles with insecurity and needs to boost their confidence. I don't want them to hear the same message that the leader who needs to be humbled a little bit, which we all could stand to be humbled.
Yes.
So how do I write this in a way that speaks to the unique person? So it's got a lot of reflection questions in it that hopefully are going to help people apply it uniquely to them. And we'll see if I pulled it off. I don't know. We'll see, but I am very excited.
This is going to be good. Okay, awesome. Well, this is the way I conclude this is going to be interesting, because I ask all of my guests if you could define leadership in a single sentence, what would that be? And that was one of the ones that you said the definition of leadership is like impossible.
I don't love that. Yeah.
Yeah, this is going to be interesting.
Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna take a stab at it. Although I just want to say I like
disclaimer.
Don't feel disclaimer. I don't feel like it's gonna capture it perfectly, nor should it. I think I would, if I had to say it in a sentence, I would say I think leadership is, so it's the act of aligning people and their talents and their strengths and their values and their efforts towards a shared goal while driving engagement. Yeah.
Okay. I love that. And what's really neat about this too is when I ask people, this is the reason why I even ask the question, is because I know it's not the same definition over and over. And I've done 30 something now podcasts, and very few of them actually align entirely. And so, of course, there's times I hear humility, I hear service. Some of the themes kind of continue, but they're all framed a little bit different in how even some of these things are used. And so I just think that's even like a nod to what you're saying of like, it can't be summed up in a single sentence. And I think that's like the beauty of it. It's like, how do you do that? But collectively, we really can't, right? Because if we took all these definitions, we'd have a whole, 3 pages of Webster's just like filled up on what leadership actually means. And so thank you for that. Thank you for your time today. I really enjoyed this. I do think people can take practical steps in like, what can we do in our organization or even personally? And I think even knowing and having you as a resource, I think is phenomenal for people to know that. Like, there's people that do this for a living and got to have you on here today to show what that looks like.
Well, thanks for having me. This was really fun and best part of my day so far. I got to go figure out this title though now.
You've got some work to do. So
that's not going to be as fun as this. Yeah.
I'm excited to hear what I need to go look at this poll. Maybe even give my input on it.
Please
today.
Please. Yeah. Okay. I need all the help I can get.
I'll get the cobwebs brushed off of my LinkedIn profile so I can go engage in it. But, okay. Well, thanks again, and just wish you the best of luck. I'm gonna be looking out for it, and we'll promote it as much as we can.
Thanks, Ruben. Appreciate you.